Hey guys, Senza here, and welcome to another Shadowlands Alpha video. Now in this video we're going to finally be looking at the Death Knight specs and just a little first look on how they currently are in Shadowlands. Now we're only going to go over the DPS specs of Unholy and Frost. We're starting with Unholy. I really like Unholy. I've liked Unholy since Legion, and it's just, yeah, it just feels really nice right now. And from my experience so far in Shadowlands, it for questing and leveling, it definitely seems like the go-to spec because it's not just because it's a pet class, because the pets it doesn't work quite like how hunters and warlock pets work. They don't really taunt, um, but as you can see, they do still kind of get their attention. But just in general, I've just survived much more. I could do more damage. It feels better to me leveling as an Unholy Death Knight. And I really like it, and as we'll see coming up, some of the changes that have been made just make the spec even better. So let's go ahead and get to those skill and talent changes. Now let's go over the ability changes. Baseline abilities with the unpruning and just changes to abilities in general, and then of course new abilities that might be coming. So first we got anti-magic zones coming back, and it's a bubble up for 10 seconds, and it's on a 2-minute cooldown, and it reduces spell damage taken by all party or raid members by 20%. So it's a nice little utility thing that any Death Knight can use in his baseline. And then we got Icebound Fortitude and Lichborn are now can both be used as baseline for all Death Knights. But they did change it a little bit. So before, Lichborn was a PvP talent, and it replaced Icebound Fortitude. And what it did was it reduced the damage just like Icebound Fortitude did, but then it also slowed you down, and it had a shorter cooldown, and it made you immune to stun, snare, fear, and roots. So now Icebound Fortitude is still the same, but instead of Lichborn replacing it, it will give you leech for 10% leech for 10 seconds, and it also makes you immune to charm, fear, and sleep. So it is on a 2-minute cooldown instead of the like 55-second cooldown. I think it might have been adjusted by haste, but I'm not sure. But either way, 2-minute cooldown instead of less than a minute. Icebound Fortitude is still about the same. So basically, you have two baseline defensives now. They're just 2 and 3 minutes apiece. Also, Raise Dead can now be used for each spec again. Of course, for Unholy, it's gonna you keep the pet. Just it works just the same. But for Blood and Frost, it's on a 2-minute cooldown, and they last for 1 minute. And that's important because of the new baseline ability that we're getting called Sacrificial Pact at 54. And what that does is it sacrifices your ghoul to deal damage up to 8 enemies and heal for 20% of your maximum health. So this is a nice little damage and healing cooldown that you can do. And it's nice for Unholy because, Unholy, their Raised Dead is only at a 30-second cooldown. Now, if you use this frequently, then you're going to be at a DPS loss because, especially now, the minion's going to do a lot of damage. So you don't want that to be gone. But either way, it's a pretty good ability, and it's something that you're always going to want to use. As Frost and Blood, you have to be more strategic with it because you have a cooldown on the undead on the Raised Dead, but the cooldown does actually line up with the Sacrificial Pact cooldown. So you could just summon the ghoul or whatever, the minion, to use Sacrificial Pact, and then that's it. But either way, that's a nice new ability. And then for the actual just straight Unholy, we have Summon Gargoyle now, and I'll go over what that means for the talent changes. We have Summon Gargoyle baseline, and it does just like when you get to 52, you unlock the 1% damage increase for the gargoyle for every 2 runic power you spend. So baseline gargoyle is, it's just you summon a gargoyle in the area to bombard the target for 30 seconds. And then when you get to 52, it adds the extra damage to it. So it works just like the current talent version in BFA. And that's really nice because you get literally all of that just for free. And Apocalypse works the same. Most of the unholy abilities work the same. Again, when it comes to the talents, then things will change a little bit. But going to the mastery is now a little bit different. In addition to your shadow damage being increased, it also increased the damage of your minions. So as we'll see with the changes, they're really doubling down for Unholy Death Knight and being like the necromancer, like basically the necromancer class for WoW, because they were a pet class with undead minions, but now the undead minions damage is increased even further with mastery, and then some other talent choices will increase it as well. And I'm just really liking it. Um, just a side note, I think Unholy Death Knight has been in a great spot since Legion. I really loved Unholy Death Knight since Legion, and I had always been Frost until Legion. Frost had always been my main spec, and then I switched to Unholy being my main spec because I just loved the class fantasy that it had. And then a good thing about BFA was Death Knights, Unholy Death Knights were one of the few classes, only one I could think of off the top of my head, where they got their artifact ability baseline. Apocalypse was just so good and so central to the spec that, they got it baseline. But anyway, back to this. The other things are the same. Scourge Strike is just damage is increased as you level up once you get to 56. And then at 58, actually, the Dark Transformation skill will grant your ghoul 100% energy. So that's pretty cool. But let's go to the talents now, because this is some of the things have changed. There are quite a few things that are the same, but there's some pretty interesting changes. So first we have the first row. Nothing is different in the first row, but again, All Will Serve was already one of the best talents to use in this row before, and now that minions are affected by mastery, so their damage is increased as well, I think this will be even better talent. So this will probably end up being the best talent. Again, soulbinds, legendaries, and stuff like that could change things, but this is even stronger talent now. Now in this row, these abilities are the same, Bursting Swords and Ebon Fever, but Unholy Blight is a little bit different now. Now it stacks its damage up 4 times. So if anybody hasn't used Unholy Blight, it surrounds you with insects for 6 seconds, and it'll hit all nearby enemies and give them a dot that lasts for 14 seconds. In BFA, it's just a dot. In Shadowlands, the dot stacks up to 4 times. And on top of that, your minions will deal 5% increased damage to all enemies that are affected by the blight. So as you can see, we're already just within the first 2 rows, and with the change that they made to mastery, your minions are much stronger than before. They're getting increased damage from mastery. Unholy Blight will now cause them to do even more increased damage. All Will Serve, has another minion, so that's increased damage. This is a very pet-oriented, build. It's almost like the melee version of Beast Mastery. So I actually have been using that, and I really like Unholy Blight, and it just adds some cool new flavor to the spec. I mean, again, Unholy Blight was already in the game, but I like the Shadowlands version more. This row is the same. Yeah. This row, I believe, is the same. Yep, same row. So Reaper's still pretty nice. And this row is also the same. Side note, I really don't like that. Dev Knights already don't have that great movement to begin with, even though we had gotten Death's Advance, Baseline, last expansion. Having Wraithwalk be a talent choice just doesn't feel good. But there are times when you would probably want to use the Magic Shell. Anyway, only a few new changes. This row is mostly the same, except Defile has been changed slightly, and I'm actually using Defile now. The only difference is in BFA, Defile is just a stronger Death and Decay, and It works the same as If and Decay. It's just stronger, has a shorter cooldown, and the size will grow as enemies are standing in it. Now, on top of that, there's all of that in Shadowlands, but as the Defile grows, it also deals increasing damage. So not only is it stronger, has a shorter cooldown, it'll get even stronger over time. So it's actually a pretty good AoE ability. I don't know if it's going to be better than Epidemic, but it probably will end up beating out Pestilence, but we'll have to see. Now, in this row, everything Unholy Frenzy is the same, but Unholy Pact is a new talent and an Army of the Damned. I'll go over Unholy Pact in just a second. But Army of the Damned works just like it does in BFA with the addition of the Mages of the Dead. So Death Coil reduced the cooldown of Apocalypse by 1 second and Army of the Dead by 5 seconds. That's how the talent works right now. And in Shadowlands, you also will be able to summon a Mages of the Dead for 15 seconds whenever you use Apocalypse and Army of the Dead. That does Frost Bolts and Shadow Bolts. So it's a buff basically to Army of the Damned to make it more enticing. And that's the Mages of the Dead was a artifact trait. I mean, not artifact trait, an Azerite trait. So it's kind of nice to see that. Now, Unholy Pact was another pretty strong take on the Azerite trait Hell Chains in BFA. So what happens is whenever you use Dark Transformation, you'll have this pact with you and your pet, and you'll see, yeah, right here, these flame chains. So any enemy that's between you and your pet will take damage. So it's a pretty good AoE ability on its own. But in addition to that, while it's active, your strength is increased by 8%. So this is just really strong. While you're just questing, leveling, I would say this is probably the one to use for sure. And even after that, it's just really good because it was already a good ability, and now you get 8% extra strength while you're using it. But I will say, because of the change by putting the Mages of the Dead in, depending on the fight, depending on the dungeon, whatever situation, if you can take advantage of the reduced cooldown, and with now pets being, the minions being even stronger, Army of the Damned, I think, will have a place. I think it will be competitive in certain situations because you're going to be able to get your minions out more frequently. You have, another strong minion that's added to that group, and on top of that, your minions are just doing much more damage. So I am actually kind of excited to see this ability. It's just this is more. I haven't really needed it in questing. Sure, I could get more Apocalypse and Armies of the Dead out, but overall, Unholy Pact was just a stronger ability to use. But yeah, overall, Unholy Death Knight is really nice. I'm really enjoying it. I've liked Unholy Death Knight since Legion. I've liked it more than Frost since Legion, and I think I still do. It's still just really good, and I can't wait to see like the legendaries. I've already been doing some of Torghast, and there's going to be some cool effects. So I actually think that this is going to be one of my top 3 classes currently. I still have more classes to go through, but of all the classes I've tested so far, it's Monk, Death Knight, Shaman are probably my favorite, with Monk and Death Knight kind of close together at the top, with Shaman just underneath, just because of the Covenant abilities. I've really liked the Covenant abilities, and Monk still has like my favorite Covenant ability, but yeah, Death Knight, Unholy Death Knight's really cool. So now let's go ahead and go on to the Frost Death Knights. Now, Frost Death Knights have always been my favorite Death Knight up until Legion, at least. I had always played Frost, and it was always my go-to spec. Even in Legion, I played it a lot, but Unholy sort of had taken it over recently. Now, in Shadowlands, as you can see, I'm using a two-handed weapon, and it's actually pretty nice. So it's nice to be able to use that again. I'm sure plenty of Frost Death Knights are going to love that for just multiple reasons and thematically, class fantasy. It's nice to be able to use a two-handed weapon again. For the most part, the spec plays pretty similarly to the way it does now. There's some baseline changes and some talent changes so that do make it more fun. But honestly, I still like Unholy more. Frost is cool. I do like Frost, and I definitely can't wait to see how it performs with, like, at end game with everything being involved. But it's still, if you like Frost Death Knight before, you're still going to like it now. I assume if you didn't really like it, I don't think it's going to be much of a change that you would want to play it, but it's not a bad spec. I just think Unholy is just better and more fun in my opinion. And now for the Frost ability changes. So just like Unholy, they have anti-magic zone baseline. They also get Death Coil as well, though you may not use Death Coil that much as a Frost Death Knight, but it's there. There's also Raise Dead, like I mentioned earlier, and it's a 2 minute cooldown, and they only last for 1 minute. And then Sacrificial Pact works the same way. Now, for Frost, we have a few changes here. Pillar of Frost has actually been buffed by 5%. It's 20% strength increase now, going up by an extra 1% for each rune spent. And in VFA, it's only 15%. So that's a nice change. Frostworm's Fury is now baseline instead of it being a talent, and I'll go over what that means for the talent tree. And there's been a couple more things added as you level up past 50. So at 52, the damage of Obliterate is increased. You're not going to be able to see it here, but it's a 20% damage increase. Now at 56, we get Empower Rune Weapon increase, upgrade, reduces the cooldown by 15 seconds, and then Killing Machine rank 2 at level 58 will, whenever Killing Machine procs, it'll make your next Obliterate also deal frost damage. So that's a nice increase because of all the frost damage that, well, Frost Death Knights do, and because of their mastery that increases frost damage. So that's a nice little increase. Other than that, oh yeah, they get Death and Decay baseline again. So other than that, there's not that many skill changes for Frost. They work fairly similar to how they do now, but there are some, because of the baseline changes and talent changes, it will be a little bit different. So Cold Heart is back, still a talent. This row I believe is the same. Icy Talons increases melee attack speed by 5%. Same VFA. Cold Heart was the old Legion Legendary. So in this row, yep, still the same. This row hasn't changed. I believe Horn of Winter still gets the same amount. Yep, still the same amount. This row again, once again the same. Most of these are the same. These are all the same. Same talents. Permafrost, I believe that's the same talent. Yep. Those are all the same. Now the last two rows are a little bit different. So Gathering Storm is the same. It makes Remorseless Winter increase your damage and extend its duration for each rune spent. I believe that's exactly how it works increase damage by 10%. Now this is a new talent, Hyperthermic Presence. Because Frostworm's Fury was made baseline, they replaced it with this, and this is actually a pretty cool talent that I really like, and I think it works really well with the Breathless Indragosa build. So it's a 45-second cooldown ability where it reduces the runic power cost of your abilities by 35% for 8 seconds, and it does not trigger the global cooldown. So you can use this, whenever. So you can just get your runic power up, pop Sindragosa, and then use it, or use it before, or if you're getting low, use it. It does affect Breath of Sindragosa. I did test this out. So it will reduce the amount of runic power that Breath of Sindragosa uses. So it's really nice. And just in general, even if you're not using Breath of Sindragosa, that's a lot of frost strikes you can get in there. It's a noticeable difference. So I really like that ability. And then Glacial Advance is, I believe, the same. Yeah, Glacial Advance is the same. So the last row, Breath of Sindragosa hasn't changed. It's still, I believe, it's 2 minute cooldown, 16 runic power. Yeah, it still works the same. It's still gonna be probably dominant for people that don't like the Breath of Sindragosa build, and for people that do and just get punished by it, because it's a very punishing talent. So it's still gonna be probably one of the best talents to pick, especially with the changes that they made, but it hasn't changed at all. Obliteration, I think that's the same. Pillar Frost is active. Frost Strike and Howling Blast grant Killing Machine for 30% or 30% chance to um, generate a rune. So, yep, that's the same. Ice Cap is the same. Frost Strike and Obliterate critical strikes reduce the remaining cooldown of Pillar Frost. So, compared to the Unholy Death Knight, this the talent tree hasn't changed as much, but because of hyperthermic presence and getting Frostworm's Fury baseline, that's going to be pretty nice. And of course, being able to have a two-handed weapon changes things a lot. Now, I actually, the combat that I showed, I was using a two-handed weapon and using the Breath of Sindragosa build, and I actually didn't, even without Icy Talons, it didn't feel bad. Like, I thought that because you want to attack fast, basically, you want to generate runic power, and it didn't feel any worse. So it's probably gonna be personal preference. Of course, when you get max level and all the other things added, it might feel a little bit different. But at least while leveling, it felt perfectly fine using a two-handed weapon or a dual wielding weapon. I would probably still want to dual wield just because I like those new um, rune forges. Oh, that reminds me, I didn't go over the rune forges. Uh, so rune forging is they still have the same three. I mean not the Apocalypse, the Fallen Crusader, Stone Skin Gargoyle, and Razor Ice. But now they've added 5 new ones. So Rune of Hysteria, again, this is going to be great for Frost Death Knight. It increases maximum runic power by 20. That alone means you'll be able to, use breath longer, and your attacks will have a chance to increase your runic power generation by 20% for 8 seconds. Like, I feel like this was made specifically for Breath of Sindragosa and to make it less punishing. So dual wielding Frost Death Knights will most likely want to use Hysteria and then Razor Ice. Of course, Fallen Crusader still, it's 15% increase in strength. It's still a nice damage increase. So when it comes to numbers, Fallen Crusader might end up still being better, but it is still a nice bonus. Sanguination will cause your Death Strike to deal increased damage based on the target's missing health, and when you fall below 35% health, you'll heal for 48% of your maximum health. Great tanking, rune, but also good for if you just really want to survive. Maybe if you're doing some challenging content, like how like the Mage Tower was, for instance, in Legion, or if you're doing like something, maybe even Torghast. Anyway, the point is, this has uses for non-tanks as well. You may not use it that much, but being able to heal is going to be really nice. Spell warding, I would say this is more of a PvP rune, but there are some small uses that it could have in PvE. But what it does is it deflects 3% of all spell damage, and it has a chance to create a shield that absorbs magic damage, equal to 10% of your maximum health. And when an enemy damages the shield, their cast speed is reduced. So to me, that just screams PvP. But again, there's some really tough casters out there that could be used. I don't see myself in a PvE situation, even in those small uses, using this above any of the other runes. But it is there. Apocalypse is probably the coolest one in my opinion. It's definitely aimed towards Unholy Death Knights because it causes your ghouls attacks to give a chance to apply one of the following debuffs. The 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse debuffs. There's Death, which gives a healing reduction to the target. War increases the damage taken from the Death Knight. So when the enemy has war on them, you'll do more damage to them. And then Famine is the opposite. When they have Famine on them, they'll do less damage to you. And then Pestilence will slow them down and deal damage over time. So it's just completely random. And again, when it comes to actual numbers, Fallen Crusader could end up still being better, but I think it's such a cool rune to have for Unholy Death Knights. And you can get use of it with the other 2 specs, but since you're not going to have the ghoul out that much, it's not going to be as effective. Whereas Unholy Death Knights get the benefit from this at all times. And then finally, another one that I really like, and one that I think is definitely meant for questing and just world content in general, Rune of Unending Thirst. It grants you 10% haste and movement speed, and it heals you for 5% of your max health whenever you kill an enemy. And then also it increases your movement speed while dead by 10%. So this is definitely meant for world content. Um, but 10% haste and movement speed is pretty good. Again, overall, maybe not as good as some of the other ones, but I can definitely know situations where, as Unholy Death Knight especially, I would love to have that extra haste and movement speed. So, but yeah, those are all the runes, all the changes, everything that's new, besides of course the Covenant abilities for the Death Knights. If you liked the video, please give a like and subscribe for future videos. I'm going to continue doing this content. I I actually really like Death Knight, and I'm definitely want to do some more Torghast stuff. But some videos that are coming up besides continuing these first looks at the melee specs, I'm planning on going through Torghast and looking at some of the anima powers and sort of theorizing and um, seeing what could possibly be some legendary effects. So I think that would be a pretty cool series and some good theory crafting. I'd like to um, you know talk with the community and see what they think about potential legendary effects. But as always, thanks for watching.